Welcome back, my dudes. I've been wanting to do this topic for a little while, because when I was a brand new baby DM cutting my teeth on storytelling in Dungeons & Dragons for the very first time, this would have been a really helpful topic for me. You see, maybe I'm not alone, but the single scariest thing for me when I began being a dungeon master for my beautiful family was towns, specifically how to make them feel like a real town. If you watched a few of my videos, you know that I'm a bit of a romantic when it comes to D&D. I love the feeling of D&D. I love the atmosphere that is created by a good dungeon master who's trying to paint a vivid picture in the minds of their players. So as my players finish off Cragmaw Hideout in Lost Mine of Phandelver and headed their way into Phandalin, I panicked. You see, I was scared to death of all the NPCs and all the plot lines and locations and how they all work together. It's a lot to keep up with, and as a dungeon master, we are constantly questioning ourselves, constantly worried about the experience we're giving our players. And this was a big deal to me because I wanted to have the very best game experience for my players possible. So today we're going to talk about towns. We're going to talk about how to do them better and how to do them easier, how to not panic, not freak out, and keep everything straight. I took a minute to ask Progressive D&D's very own Dan Moran what his thoughts were on towns and Dungeons & Dragons. He had this to say.
So when I'm designing the first town for my adventure, I look at this as the central hub of the adventure itself. This is where all the storylines, plot hooks, everything will spoke off from this central location that the players are starting in. So I like to look at it from a short-term perspective and a long-term perspective. Short term, I like the players to be able to spend 1 or 2 sessions in here, getting their feet wet, getting to know some of the storylines of the adventure. And from a long term, I love to put in layers of foreshadowing of what they might be seeing as the end game for this adventure.
He brings up a pretty interesting point about how long we should let our players marinate in town before they charge off into the hills to fight some ghost or take off after some cavern. He even suggests just giving them a session just to feel out the town, get used to the NPCs, meet people, ask questions, and build their rapport with the local townsfolk. In Lost Mine of Phandelver, there's even some combat encounter built into the initial visit to Phandalin, so you can keep your party entertained while they're feeling out the town and learning what's going on. But how can I run this town in theater of the mind and still paint that picture of a bustling frontier town with a ton of stories to tell and plots to unfold? How do I make all the NPCs feel unique and recognizable? How do I make the businesses feel believable? In short, how do I make Phandalin feel alive? Not just be words on paper and quest cards to hand out. Well, I stumbled through my first town, and whether you're preparing to run a small frontier town like Phandalin or a huge metropolis like Neverwinter or Waterdeep, here are some things I learned along the way that helps me to run towns better and, more importantly, more comfortably. First, don't just hand out the map the second they walk into town. Instead, ask your players what they're going to do, what they're after. Your players should know what they're after in Phandalin, we hope, and that means they should know what to ask the nearest NPC. They may be after Barthen's provisions because they need to return the cart, or maybe it's getting late and they need to get lodging, so they're looking for the Stonehill Inn. Understanding what your players' motivations are in town can help you narrow down what you need to prep for to at least get that first step going. But handing them a map, well, that invites them to go randomly wandering around town, knocking on doors with information their characters would probably not have. So force your players to walk around town and ask for directions. It's a great chance to meet NPCs and to start spreading rumors and giving little factoids about what's going on in town. Next, you as the DM, you see the entire town. You see the huge map, you see a huge list of NPCs, you see how they interact with each other and which ones are important to the story as a whole. But the players don't see this. If the players are in the Stonehill Inn, they see a tavern, they see a barkeep, and they see a few NPCs. You see, players, they tend to get tunnel vision. They see what's in front of them. And we can use that tunnel vision in order to narrow down the information we need to have on hand at any given point. So don't get hung up on the 20 different NPCs that are all over the town. Instead, worry about the 4 NPCs that are currently in the tavern with the players. It's also a good idea to go ahead and print out a list of the local rumors and talk, the news of the region. In a lot of adventures, this could even be a random table, but I tend to just use the one that makes the most sense at that exact moment. And since it's printed out, you can just go ahead and one-line the one that you've already used, so it'll be easy for you to keep track of what the players do and do not currently know, or you hope they know. Make a quick list of the shops in town, who owns them, and what they generally sell. This can help when the players inevitably ask where they can buy some new rope or a brand new shield. Also, while you're making lists, go ahead and jot down some of the local factions you might find in your town. In Phandalin, that would be the Red Brands, and you also might want to note where you might find them, because for sure they're going to come up in conversation at some point, probably pretty early. As for personalities of your NPCs and trying to make them unique and recognizable, it can be helpful to give them some unusual traits like a limp, a stutter, a lisp, or maybe a funny haircut. And don't be afraid to steal personalities from your favorite shows or movies. Quite literally, the Stone Inn barkeep, Toblin, in my game is based off of Greg the garlic farmer off of Viva la Dirt League. I did that because I know the character so well that I can almost do his voice even though I'm terrible at voices, and at the same time I can roleplay him very easily because I've just seen a lot of them. Also good to remember is that NPCs don't have to adore the players. To the innkeeper at the Stonehill, the players could simply be just another patron, coins in his pocket. Children playing in the streets with a ball could be in complete awe of the players because they're this adventuring group and they want to run up and they want to ask questions and want to talk about how when they grow up, they're going to go out and slay dragons themselves. Or they could kick the ball right past them because it's just another set of grown-ups walking through town. Also, try to keep a small list of NPCs that you've just made up. Just have them at the ready, a name and a race, and it's anything you can plug in anywhere you need to. It's important when you're improvising or making up anything on the spot that you don't have a delay there, because we want to keep the players guessing which NPC in town is plot critical and which one is background. Without that delay, they really have no way of knowing. But if they ask you the name of the local guard and you stop, stare at them and say, Bob, they're going to know that that guard doesn't really exist in the story, and therefore, their attention should be elsewhere. We want them guessing where their attention should be at all times. That way they're paying attention to everything. And keep in mind some realistic traits of the town. Know its climate, and toss out some changes in the weather here and there. Contrast the sights and sounds of day versus night. Do the players hear birds chirping, or do they hear a wolf howling in the distance? A local dog running loose, or children playing in the streets? Businesses that are either opened or closed. Describe briefly and offhand the colors of buildings and roofs. The stone roads or the dirt paths of the town. Just in general, all the sights, smells, and sounds around them. These small, offhanded, descriptive tidbits of information, they're really seeds in the players' minds, because the players are going to hear this and they're going to start building up what the town feels like to them. And also, as one small but very important note, I was watching a pretty interesting video by Enter the Dungeon, and he had this to say about preparation in Dungeons & Dragons.
DMs are players too. One of the things that holds back new DMs is not having fun while preparing for the game. And when you think about it, that's terrible, because the Dungeon Master preparing for the game is basically another aspect of them playing the game.
He says preparing for the game is another aspect of playing the game, and this is so true. We should be enjoying our prep, not stressing it. You can almost think of it as a one-person D&D session where we're meeting our characters and figuring out how they all interact together. You see, as Dungeon Masters, we live in this amazing gray area between a reader and a writer of our own stories. We read the adventures and then we adjust them freely to fit our players, and more importantly, to fit ourselves. We as Dungeon Masters should love the areas that our players in, because we know all the secrets, we know all of the plots. We are in God mode in our own games, and that love of that scene, that love of that town or that city will shine through to the players, and they're going to love it just as much. So go out there, get organized, don't overthink it, and don't be afraid to make it your own. The players don't have a script. There is no script. The players only have their characters, and they have the world which you're weaving around them. So go ahead and just make it a world that you love as much as your players will. So that's it, my fellow storytellers. Be sure to drop us a subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment with your best tip for running cities and towns and Dungeons & Dragons. And if you have a minute, check out these other videos you might have missed. I'll see you guys next time.